Hey, welcome back. This is Keith Maxey. I have my business, Garnet Homestays, which is an Airbnb arbitrage business. And I thought I would actually talk to you today about why I started, when I started, and how I was able to actually grow and scale from there. So at the time, I was already, let's go back to 2019. I had just completed a few other real estate projects that allowed me to convert a primary residence. I was able to buy a new primary residence, keep the old one, and start converting that into an Airbnb. So at first, we were going to rent it out and to long-term tenants. But while I was researching more real estate investing strategies, I had also started researching short-term rental strategies and realized that there is such a demand for it, and it was knowing a little bit more than everybody else. And, this goes from the years of experience that I had as a video game designer, that researching topics, different types of topics for in-depth analysis and in-depth content research really allowed me to quickly understand what were the key features, and then just find the right sources of information, just consuming as much as I could. And when I first started, other than that initial property, I didn't really have any knowledge, plans, connections that were going to be there to really help me out. But my wife and I had joked around one day about opening up our own bed and breakfast. It would be a great sort of retirement job where you get to meet new people, make great meals, talk about stuff, and then people leave. You turn things over and get ready for the next set of guests that are coming in. And, when we jokingly spoke about that, my brain immediately went into research mode and started researching as much as I could about, well, what would that look like? What would you need? What are the important things? And I knew that really it came down to three important areas of the property. Number one is going to be the bedroom, where you need to have a wonderful, cozy room that allows people to have a really good sleep or have the opportunity for a great sleep. Number two is going to be the bathroom, where people want to either end or begin their day and get ready with that, and people need use of facilities regularly. And number three was going to be everything else, what was going to be involved. Now, in a bed and breakfast, you're probably only going to be focusing on the kitchen, dining room area, maybe a little bit in a sitting room, a living room, something like that, but not as much. And I realized that if it was me in a home experience, and I had stayed at Airbnbs as well in the past, that it was going to have a little bit more to it. I needed to make it homey, but not clutter. I needed to make it cozy and comfortable, but not overwhelming with opportunities and options. So I really did a lot of research, and so I started investing into the knowledge behind what I needed for my first place. I started making furniture lists and amenity lists, and what is the guest experience going to look like? And I had documented this along the way. Well, not that much, actually. I was really bad at the documentation. It was more, I'm going to document what I'm going to buy, and then I forgot all about that. And then I would buy a little more here and forget about it, and a little more here. And then I was just kept adding and adding and adding. So I was doing some renovations on the property. Another reason why we decided to get into long-term, to not get into long-term renting and just focused on short-term, is that we previously had someone staying in our property that we had like a granny suite arrangement. It worked out really well, and we had a fantastic tenant who lived with us for I think about a year and a half. And she was wonderful. She was quiet. She had a dog. They were very quiet. They came and go as they pleased. It worked out really well. And then she gave us notice that she was moving out on her own. And, we were kind of sad to hear that, because we really enjoyed the revenue, but we enjoyed her as a tenant. And so I had to look for other tenants, and I knew that I was going to be the one dealing with all of that. And the other tenants that I had gotten were challenging. Rent started coming in late after only a few months, 2 or 3 months. They were loud, noisy. My children got to find out through the volume of their activities. My children understood how babies were made. There were, and they were just problematic to deal with. Like every time I would ask them questions, it came back with attitude and that they weren't doing anything wrong. And so quickly I realized, like, I just don't want to get into this. And I remember on the day that I was flying out of the country, on the day, like, I gave them notice in advance and I told them that they were, they got to pay the rent or they were going to be evicted. And so they immediately said, well, since you want to evict us, we're going to be leaving this Saturday. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's not what the paperwork said, but I'm not going to fight you on that. Like, you go right ahead and leave. And I did tell them that they would have to leave by a specific time because I need to change locks and so forth. And so their family came over and helped them move on that day. I had to rebuild the door that had caused some damage to it. And during the rebuild process, I put in a new lock. So once I put on that, I was like, okay, well, as soon as this closes, it locks behind you and I have to leave. I was flying out and I had to leave by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Taxi came. I'm like, sorry guys, close the door. If you need anything, we'll make it available to you in the next couple of days. Once my wife can haul it out. They didn't have anything left behind, which was good. But we had decided that we were done with that entire experience at that point. So we decided to start focusing on short-term rental. And so we converted that entire house into a short-term rental. I had focused on furniture acquisition and focusing on creating the experiences, what the guest experience was going to be. So I had that time while I was away to kind of go through that. And what I really found was that the guest experience, the easiest way to start is to start by, what do you do on a daily basis? What is your process for getting ready in the day? What do you need to end your day? And to really bookend those things. And then one of the things that you would find as a surprise and a delightful charm added to your stay that you didn't expect. Going to hotels or other Airbnbs allow you to understand what other people are doing and other systems are like, but you really have to create your own system. So that's when I started realizing there was going to be value in this. It took me a while to complete the renovations, to get everything ready. Then once I was ready to launch, hit the button, it was, that big exciting moment. I have no idea if I'm going to get input at all. And then within 48 hours, I had my first reservation. It was for 3 weeks. I was thrilled. I had more than enough to cover the rent just off of that tree. Well, more than enough to cover all my bills. With that tree reservation, I realized this is now the dream. The dream actually became reality. So yeah, when that happened, I was looking forward to the next guest. The next guest came in. Now, again, part of my story is that I launched it at the end of March of 2020, which means that within less than a week, we actually had a lockdown where I am in Canada. And, this lockdown, we had no idea it was going to be maybe a few weeks. But as part of that, we realized that, okay, we don't know what's going to go on now. Maybe travel will stop. Maybe all these other things will stop. But the next guest who reached out said that, hey, we need a place. We're moving in from out of the country and we need it for at least a month. So I gave him a bit of a discount, worked on that. And still, it was a great win. And through the conversation, I actually reached out after a week and I said, hey, you mentioned that you're going to be waiting for a house to be built and you're here in Ontario and you don't have your house built yet. When is that happening? And they said, oh, well, the plan is it should be ready for September. This is April at this point. And I'm like, well, why not stay here? We can work out a deal. You stay here and we'll make sure that it's a win-win on both sides. And they're like, yeah, this is fantastic. And I think their company actually paid for their stay. So they were super thrilled on all sides. They enjoyed the house, they enjoyed the stay, and they were able to extend their stay. So they stayed for 5 months at that point. And the first real challenge that I had with the property was really on the cleaning side. It was making sure that I had a cleaner that knew not just how to clean, but I actually walked them through my expectations on the property and what I needed from the experience. And that, I think, made a huge difference for every turnover and making sure we had 5-star reviews across the board. This was before guest favorite became something, but I, operated under super status, got that very quickly, and I was able to maintain that for a very long time. And with the cleaner and going through everything, I realized like this is actually something I have to do every single time. And so what I started to do was, I knew I needed to document it. I didn't start until after my cleaner, after a while, said, look, the schedule is a little too chaotic. I'm not familiar with doing Airbnbs and this type of business, so I can't just drop everything. I need to focus on my residential cleans. I'm like, okay, no worries, totally get it. And then I hired a third party, like a company, to actually start on that. And they worked well for a long time. They were able to get up and running, and they had multiple people on the team. So they were not just a one-person show. They were able to have a lot more flexibility. And that worked out well for a long time until they started adding more and more and more fees. Until like they were charging me, because some of their cleaners were coming from another town over, they were charging me a fee for that. And it was like, how do I know that this is the person? Like, they were covering their own costs. I get it, but I had to bear the brunt of this. It was more hidden in the fees. Maybe I wouldn't have actually had an issue with that. But that's when I had actually started documenting all the cleaning processes. And then I realized, I need a process for so many other things. Though that team was there, I was doing some little stacks, and I actually over snacked people out. I had so many stacks and, bottles of water and whatnot when they came in, and people just commented, oh my gosh, thank you so much. This is great. But I didn't document it. And every time I would go into that property, I was still fairly hands-on at the time with that property. And I would notice that, they would run out of something, not inform me. And so they'd give extra stacks of something else. And I'm like, that's never was the intention, but I never made it clear to the intentions were or what the expectations were on that side, other than restock it. Right? And then I'd go in and buy more stuff when I needed it. But yeah, when I realized that was going on, that's when I realized systems and processes were key for me, especially since I was already picking up some additional properties. So it was having these systems in place that were allowing me to focus on scalability. And then what I found as my biggest proof of concept was after, I think I was around 4 or 5 properties. I think it was around 5 properties at this point, when I realized that in order for me to scale, I needed to be able to operate remotely. So I had 5 properties, I believe, all located within driving distance. Easy, 20 minutes, half an hour tops driving distance. And so the very first one, I remember it was this odd little tiny home, and it was in a town about an hour and a half away. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to drive there on a regular basis. That's just way too far. I'm not going to do it. So that's when I started documenting and making sure I could operate remotely. And then after operating that successfully for about 6 months, now it was, because of the style of property it was, there was no way I could actually operate that in the winter. And so discussed it with the landlord, and he said, you know what, I'm going to rent it out for the winter. And he did, which was surprising because it would have been really cold in there. I don't know. These guys must have not felt the cold, but it definitely was a very good experience, because right after that, that's when I picked up my first property in the Caribbean, down in Antigua. So it was a very easy adjustment. Now, I did have to learn some cultural adjustments. Fortunately, I had lived on an island in the past and understand that people on an island work on island time, not in the fast-paced, bustling world that a lot of other people do. So we had some adjustments to make, such as having gaps between stays so that the cleaner could get in there when they felt like it. It was a little frustrating, but it worked out really well. And then very quickly, I was actually, with that client, that landlord, I was able to triple the revenue that they had previously. Now, previously they were in the pandemic. I get it. But I was able to bring back, and I actually did a lot more business than they had ever done before. So they were thrilled with it. The downside was they weren't near the water. So it was quite far inland. So we have more business travelers than anything else. And after that, when we had a few regulars, so we wound up realizing like long term, it wasn't going to be the best property for a short-term rental. And the landlord decided that they wanted to put it back as a long-term rental. And I was like, yeah, understood. I have no problem with that. But now that was the first opportunity where I'm operating outside of the country. And I realized that I can do this anywhere. Like, when I moved to the town, like an hour and a half outside of mine, I realized I can do this anywhere. And then that left me into the Caribbean. I can do this worldwide. And, I did do some experimentations. I've some networking friends that I had opportunities in Africa. So I wound up opening, they opened their first one in Nigeria and they needed help. So I was like doing a lot of the work. And that worked out well for a few months, but the revenue was just so low. It didn't make sense for me to necessarily work that hard or to really keep that forward. And then it was also difficult arranging some of the cleaning, the promises that were made for who was responsible at the property were not quite coming true, and people were just not doing the work that needed to be done. So at that point, we were like, let's park this one for now. And we're, we'll see if we get back into that one day. But in the meantime, what I realized more than anything else is that here in Canada, like I can work down in the US. I've worked with my accountant to figure out the way that I can have a tax advantaged business in the US so that when I bring back the money to Canada, I'm only taxed once at the most favorable rate. Plus, I make an extra, right now it's like 37, let's say 35%. It's a little bit more than that, but I can make a little bit more on my money. Now, if the dollar ever reaches parity, yeah, that's unfortunate. But I actually have a lot more business that will go on in the US than here in Canada because there just seems to be a little bit more demand when you know your market and being able to get into that. So like starting off with that, the proof of concept of starting off that I had to like getting into that little tiny home was such a massive game changer where the landlord said he can make rent about $500 a month, what he thought he could get for it. And we wound up actually generating over $2,000 a month for him. And then we took our cut as well. Like we were doing that as a co-hosting arrangement, but it was still essentially the same thing. And then when we started with our arbitrage, like we got into, like I have places that the rent is about $3,000. I know one place, $3,200 that we started off with in Arizona, and we did really well. Like even in the slow season, we were able to pay off all the bills and kind of in a break even, a little bit more. I think we made about like $300 to $400 a month in the slow season. And then in the high season, I remember the first month we broke $15,000 in revenue. So after all the expenses, like, you're walking away with over $10,000. It was fantastic. And $10,000 a month off one property. Like now, this can scale. And so, there's other things that I look at in order to make sure I can actually protect that profit. So a little hint, if you watch the end of this video, a little hint for you is that I focus on 4 key regions in the US and just divide the whole thing into quarters. So you have the South, and you have the North, and then you have East, and you have West. And if you just dominate in one city in each one of those quarters, it allows you to focus on different seasonality, different markets, different weather conditions, because, in the North, you're going to have slower season unless if you're in a mountainous area. But it also allows you to create more opportunity in different markets. And then if for whatever reason, let's say if I'm in the southeast of the US, very prone to hurricanes and tropical storms. So that could actually cause a lot of problems with some of those units. If that's the case, then I have the other ones to actually offset any losses through the profits that I'm generating there. So I can do well. And then there are some all season properties that are available. As long as you find those markets where you can operate, they can be phenomenal. They can be fantastic in terms of making sure that you're operating and not having those issues. So really all of this, what it comes down to is that by starting and pushing myself to work remotely, I actually sought out the first remote location. And I was very lucky. It was like within a month, I had the first one actually up and ready to go. And then once I had that, hiring the cleaner remotely and hiring some handyman remotely just to get things ready, and then doing all of that remotely. Once I realized that I can do that, then focused and doubled down on making sure everything is remote. And then that allowed me to build the systems so that I could actually take that proof of concept and then turn it into an actual business. And now I actually have not only my business here in Canada, I also have my business in the US. So now I can operate anywhere in the world and work on a repeatable process that doesn't require luck. It just requires patterns that I'm following in order to generate the profits that I do. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this actually provides you with a little bit of understanding of sort of my journey and where I went with short-term rentals. And maybe it gives you a little bit of knowledge on how to take your journey to the next level and start hosting remotely. So thanks again and good luck. If you guys want any more information, message me, comment below if you have any thoughts of your journey or where you would like to go. And, I'm more than happy to weigh in and give you my thoughts. All right. Cheers.